Portable TV. Come watch with me.
The UK is now saying it has no plans to stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia just because the US decided to do so, despite ongoing concerns over how the kingdom has played a devastating role in the war in Yemen that has now created the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. British officials say their arms deals with the Saudis are acceptable because they haven't broken any laws. Joining me now to discuss is former UK MP George Galloway. All right, George, I know you're going to have a lot to say on this one, so let's start with what we're hearing from the UK specifically. They seem to be saying that they aren't worried about the deadly weapons that they are selling because Saudi Arabia is promising to use them for humanitarian purposes only first. What's your response to that?
Well, those promises aren't worth the paper they aren't written on, of course. Anyone who would believe a verbal promise from the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia, I've got a bridge here that I could sell them going cheap. This is a government that chopped an American-based correspondent, journalist, and columnist, Mr. Khashoggi, into pieces in their consulate in Istanbul, and then lied about it for many weeks, claimed that the man had left the consulate in one piece, when in fact he was in many, many pieces and flushed down a drain. These people are inveterate liars, kleptocrats, head choppers, and they're funding head choppers and heart eaters all over the world. So why would you believe any assurance given by them? And these weapons are chopping the Yemeni people, including women and children, into pieces just the same. And it's a dark day when Britain is insisting on continuing to sell weapons into a war that even the government of the United States of America can no longer stomach. If that's not a dark day for Britain, I don't know what would be.
Yeah, it truly is horrific what has happened in Yemen and what the U.S. and the UK have both allowed to happen by continuing these deals with Saudi Arabia. Now, it is interesting because the UK actually did have a ban of its own on those deals with Saudi Arabia briefly. It lifted that ban last year, and since then, in just 3 months' time, it sold $1.9 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia. So clearly all of those concerns came right back around there, and they continued with those deals. Is this a case where money is talking louder than the human lives that are being taken in Yemen?
Well, as Bob Dylan says, money doesn't talk, it swears. And how much swearing is involved in a $1.4 billion deal? Our law says that we will not sell weapons that are used for either internal repression or external aggression. It's hard to imagine what else weapons would be used for, I should say, in today's world. But that is precisely what they are being used for. The internal repression of the people of Saudi Arabia and the external aggression against the poorest country in the entire Middle East, one of the poorest countries in the whole world. 40% of our weapons sales go to these head choppers in Saudi Arabia. It's an utterly shameful thing, but it's a dripping roast of wealth and money for those that are involved in this grisly trade.
To see how they all seem to be following those dollar signs. Now, even though we've seen some updates in policies here in the U.S. from the Biden administration, there are still concerns that the U.S. will reverse course here and that this freeze on arms deals with Saudi Arabia will only be temporary. Are we seeing the UK wait to sort of make a move until it sees what its close ally plans to do in the long term? And of course, where else in the Middle East the U.S. plans to allocate those resources?
Yes, maybe so, and beware of the Greeks bearing gifts, they say, and so I'd say beware of Joe Biden's promise on this, because there's in the small print every possibility that other kinds of cooperation with the Saudi war machine, which is dealing death and destruction in Yemen every day, could still continue. Don't forget, we didn't just send them weapons, we sent them military officers and specialists to help them the better to use those weapons. And if we leave those specialists in place, then all they're doing is continuing to operate the weapons we've already sold them. Saudi Arabia has enough weapons, of course, to drown all of Yemen in blood, because that's more or less what they do with their money. They spend it on weapons from Western countries as a kind of protection money. We buy your weapons, your arms corporations kick back some of it to us, maybe even to some Western politicians, but the price for that is that you keep us in power. And so Saudi Arabia is armed to the teeth, and banning weapons now will not be any guarantee at all of salvation for the poor people of Yemen. But I did like what President Biden said. He said this was a humanitarian catastrophe. These are very strong words, but they're not too strong for what has actually happened in Yemen, where famine, cholera, all kinds of disease, including coronavirus, added to the weapons of war, have laid waste this very poor country and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And President Biden said reportedly, this war has to end. I hope that he means it. And if he means it, he should get the Nobel Prize for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. A humanitarian catastrophe seems to be taking